morning. My name is Megan Englert. I'm currently a senior studying computer science and art history at the University of Delaware. And right now I'm really excited to present my research, which is entitled Building Curricular Supports Through Undergraduate Teaching Assistants to Scale Individualized Instruction in CS1. So essentially what led to this was we knew that, and when I say we, I refer to my wonderful research advisor, Dr. Bart. Hi. We knew that coming into this past fall, we would be expecting a massive influx of students, even more than we have in the past. So we started to wonder, what can we do to actually reduce the impacts of this large-scale class size without receiving any additional faculty or necessarily graduate TA support from our department. So luckily, we as a department already had a UTA system with a 12-to-1 ratio we were given with our students to TAs. So we started to work on restructuring the course to better leverage these TAs to actually make an impact for our students. So here's our proposed course changes. The course fundamentally uses an automated Python programming problem on Canvas. So it's already kind of operating in the flipped classroom model where all of the programming knowledge per se is already done through Canvas, and time spent in class is spent more on working on worksheets and engaging actively with material and collaborating with others. So previously, students would spend 2.5 hours of lecture per week with the instructor working collaboratively on these worksheets. Students were additionally required to attend a weekly 90-minute lab, which served predominantly as just open work time, with the UTAs present to answer any questions that people came across. So first, we completely removed the 90-minute lab session. TAs largely reported that students were not engaging very much, students weren't really attending, and a lot of students were frustrated that they would go and none of their classmates would be there. So instead, what we did was we took that 2.5 hours of active engaged class time and instead divided it up between the professor, which would be half the time, and the UTAs. So the idea here is the professor would be teaching kind of soft skills things, stuff that you can't really auto-grade, such as like code coverage or debugging strategies, while the UTAs would be covering material that just reinforce the module content. So that's where you would do your worksheet about function and data types. About the undergraduate TA system at UD, generally TAs are hosting office hours, they're grading, they're running lab sessions, and they're answering course-related questions in the forums, and they're also paid $15 an hour, which is pretty competitive in Delaware. So the issue, though, is that as of fall 2022, there was no dedicated staff members who actually hiring or training or managing the TAs. It was all just kind of tacked on to a professor's duties, and that was it. So shortly before the beginning of the semester, recommended potential UTAs were just emailed a Google form, essentially asking for their availability for the semester and their grades. And positions are assigned basically by availability in those grades only, rather than actually looking into the student's course fit and interests. And this might be okay if we had training, but we did not have that either. So I found with my experience that mileage may vary significantly when it comes to this turning you loose to the professor. I've had great experiences, like with my advisor, Dr. Bart, and I've had experiences where I did not get an email back from the professor within the first week of classes. So we wanted to think about how can we build upon the current UTA system to, number one, reduce that lecture load from the instructor in order to accommodate more students, but not putting students in those very large classroom environments for a ton of time. Further, we wanted to empower these undergraduate teaching assistants to feel prepared coming into their classroom and feel like they're ready to teach and ready to engage with their students in a way that they didn't feel so before. And then lastly, we wanted to improve student motivation by combating some of the feelings of course apathy and low sense of belonging that are typically associated with large class sizes. So this is where I come in. So to start out, we made a big new hiring process. You're going to see this QR code a lot. It's all the same QR code, even though it's going to show up on a bunch of slides. It has all of my materials and references. So if you want to scan it, you can scan it, or you have many other opportunities too. So here, just as a summary of the biggest changes we made to the hiring process. We took this application and built upon it by adding 3 short answer questions. And rather than just sending it out to the recommended TAs, we ended up sending it out to everyone in the department to kind of give everybody a chance to show us what they have and how interested they are. And then we also added an entire interview process. So looking at this on a more specific scale, we actually received 81 applicants through the written application, and they were all scored essentially on thoughtfulness and effort in their short answers. We were really just looking for people who were engaging and excited about the position. Then interview offers were determined by a sliding GPA minimum, where applicants with better written scores had more flexibility with their GPA requirement, while applicants with lower written scores had to be a bit higher in GPA. Out of the 54 interview offers we made, 45 chose to complete an interview. Those interviews were conducted over Zoom in groups of 3 applicants at a time. And then hiring decisions, we took into account availability, but also your interview and written scores, as well as your personality fit for the students that we generally encounter in RCS1. Moving on, we also made a training program. So while we originally hoped to have a TA training synchronous half-day session either in person or on Zoom prior to the start of the semester, it quickly became apparent that that was just not going to work. Everybody's on vacation and getting ready to move and finishing their internship. So next best option, asynchronous Canvas modules. So this obviously led to some issues. Number 1, how do we balance providing lots and lots of information against the fatigue of reading Canvas pages? And number 2, how do we actually assess the UTA's understanding of this course content through these Canvas assignments rather than face-to-face interactions? So I took inspiration from several sources. So I spent some time trying to find some good training materials, especially those that were already being delivered asynchronously, but I kind of struggled to find those that actually were supposed to be done in an asynchronous format. There were lots of good resources out there, but all of them were meant for an in-person interactive training session. So these 2 specifically, I pulled lots of ideas from and essentially formed the basic structure and course concepts around what was already covered in those. Further, I had included as an interview question, if you were to take a TA training course, what would you most like to have included in it? Which really helped me to tailor and refine what I'm including to really get to what is relevant to our TA specifically. And of course, as my own experience as a teaching assistant for 2 years already, I included a bunch of things that I wish I knew. So each lesson in this campus course has more or less the same structure. It includes a little bit of information about why this lesson is useful, trying to get those TAs to really pay attention and see what they should be doing and getting away from this. And then I wrote most of the text of the pages and included some YouTube videos where appropriate. And lastly, most lessons have either a quiz or activity that kind of get them to apply the information or engage with material in a way that gets them set up to actually start the semester as a TA. The training course also is boiled down into 3 essential modules. One is the most important things you absolutely need to know, such as how to not violate FERPA or Delaware labor laws, as well as making sure that our TAs have a clear understanding of their responsibilities for the semester. Module 1 goes on to explain the more basic sides of being a TA with some general advice for first-time TAs, as well as instructions on how to navigate Canvas and the other tools we use for the course. And Module 2 lastly goes into some pedagogy with topics on how to help students without giving them the answer, having healthy interactions with students about their grades, and creating a more inclusive environment in classroom space. So our TAs widely reported spending 2 to 3 hours on this in total and referring back to it throughout the semester. So as a result, we successfully decreased instructor lecture load. Very excitingly, we also kind of roped in the sister course, which is SIGCSE 106 to this, which brought in 3 additional instructors to this whole process, and they all reported very similar findings. Further, we consistently use the Canvas course throughout the 30 seconds? Okay. We use the Canvas course to eliminate the need for weekly meetings. The TAs really, really liked it. And lastly, this is 376 students for both 108 and 106 saying that they really had a good time with the TA. Also, I'm currently working to generalize the Canvas course to be applicable to everybody and get another head TA and also do more data analysis. And thank you so much to my research advisor, Dr. Curry, for helping me on this. Thank you so much. I'm so excited I got to talk to you guys.
I went on your site because I got UQR. Wow, there's a lot on here.
Yeah, I know.
So I'm going to be one of those jurors who gives you a comment rather than a question, which is Valerie Bard has sent around things which were good advice for TAs around DEI. And then there's also, if you Google learning assistance, it's also some good advice. You're very extensive, so maybe you've got that already, but it might be something to look at.
Yeah, I pulled in a lot of different sources. What you see on that page is just a sampling of some of the Canvas content. I didn't manage to convert all of the pages over. But yeah, I looked at a lot of different curriculums.
Survey. You have a pre and post surveys with the students?
Yes, I just haven't been able to really dig into that yet because there's so much data.
So if I understood correctly, people had to submit their GPA as part of the application process?
So, not exactly. They didn't have to self-report their GPA, but instead all of the applications were scored and then sent over to my research advisor, who then basically just filtered out everybody who didn't meet the requirement.
So first semester students could apply to the APA?
So this process was done over the summer. So everybody applying had to have already done a full year. Am I calling them people?
Okay, what?
So you showed some graphs about how professors time was reduced, things like that. But if you had to say, what was your original objective in formalizing this process? What was the thing you were trying to make better? What would you say was?
The clearest thing for me would definitely be the undergraduate TA experience. It was okay in the past, but my peers and I largely found that we were a little bit lost and a little bit confused and not really feeling like, oh yeah, we can handle this. So really wanted to try to gather some resources together to make sure that those people could feel prepared.
And based on your post surveys, do you feel like that this did it?
I really did. And I had many experiences like talking to other TAs who didn't even fully complete the course, showing them my content and then being like, how did I not know this? How did I not know this after TAing for 2 semesters, especially with a lot of the Canvas stuff? Yeah.
So I guess maybe a little clarity on what your experimental goal was. Were you trying to reduce the professor time? Or were you trying to increase the capability of TAs? What was your specific focus?
So it's horrible to say this, but all of the above. All of those goals were very much entangled with each other. We found that students were feeling really distant because of a lot of time in very large lecture spaces with one instructor. And at the same time, we needed to make the TAs feel more capable in order to handle those more responsibilities. And we wanted to put students spending more time and more quality time with their TAs to feel more engaged and more connected than they would in a large class setting.
Can I follow?
Yeah.
If you had one measure that you wanted to, that you would consider your biggest success when you go over your post-mortem data, what are you hoping to get?
It's something that's very hard to measure, but I'm most interested in who we were able to pull along with us who otherwise we may have lost. There have been many times as I was a TA experiencing students who were going through something that I was not prepared to help them with. And it's really important that we could have lost those students. They could have just decided, okay, this isn't worth my time. I need to go focus on my family and other things. But instead, we have been more or less able to help a lot more students along the way and keep them attached to this course through making this connection for them. Yeah.
So Megan, it's clear this is a labor of love, right? About the materials you've put together and the resources that are in this space. And you talked about generalizing it, right? And thinking about how it can be applied. So how do you set it free, right? So there's clearly, I'll call it a self-help guide, right, for TAs, right? And also making the bridge and the impact in the classroom space. So what does scaling this look like for you? So beyond Delaware, what's next? How do you make it to that next step?
I think my biggest thing right now is getting this course from the point of being what it is in our little tiny bubble and getting a nice export out there that I know that a lot of people are interested in from my conversations yesterday. And just working even more with TAs and getting their feedback of what's useful, what isn't as useful, and how to really refine this into something that everybody feels like, okay, I can spend 3 hours on this and I will feel good.
I'm going to follow with one more because that's what I do. So here's my question. So you have shared a ton of knowledge about what your learnings are and the things that you've identified from being a TA, right? If you had 3 minutes to sit down with a new TA who's coming in to work with a program, what's the number one piece of advice you'd share for a TA walking into an Intro to CS classroom?
So I actually have a page about this on my Canvas. But definitely the biggest piece of advice I would have is you will be wrong and it will be often. And that's okay. And we are here to support you. Your students are going to forgive you. And it's totally a normal part of learning. You're not going to be perfect, and that's fine.
Thank you.
Thank you.